Hello and welcome back to 4th Age Guides. Today we are taking a look at the Kingdom of Dale in the 4th Age Total War Dominion of Men. The Kingdom of Dale is one of several Northmen factions in the mod. They're all clustered here. There are 5 of them. And Dale is described as a mainly infantry-based faction with some good archers and access to limited engines of war. In reality, I think Dale is one of the most evenly balanced factions you can play in terms of units, and it offers, in my opinion, possibly the easiest campaign in the 4th Age Total War Dominion of Men. And I don't say that in a pejorative sense, because there are different difficulty levels and different types of factions for different days. Some days you want to feel as though your back is up against a wall and you have to win every battle by the skin of your teeth just to survive and fight on a few more turns. And some days you just want to come home after work and relax and chill out with a nice straightforward gameplay, and that is what Dale provides. I have to say that Dale has never been one of my favorite factions of the mod, but it has provided me some of my most enjoyable campaigns, if that makes sense. And this is because with the Kingdom of Dale, you are in a position to really leverage diplomacy, and we will take a look at some of that today. So to begin with, this is of course the 4th Age, and from its humble beginnings, just being allied with the Dwarves of Erebor, Dale has, we imagine, expanded quite a bit, south and east along the River Running, all the way to its confluence with the Kelduin, and over the northern eaves of Mirkwood over into Framsburg over in the west. So let's jump into the campaign here, and we'll see what their starting position looks like and what are some of the advantages and potential disadvantages, of which there might just be a couple. So Dale is fairly balanced, as I've said, in terms of its units. But in terms of its strategic situation, you've got just a really good one. So your capital here, of course, is the city of Dale, right next to Erebor, and this is in fact the capital of the Dwarves, the Dwarven faction, with whom you are allied. And this is a special alliance. This is not only a military access alliance, as you can see here, so you automatically have trade rights with them, military access, and an alliance, but this is an alliance in a similar fashion to that between the Reunited Kingdom and Rohan. That is to say, this alliance will almost never be broken. It's a very strong alliance, made even stronger by the fact that the Dwarves in this campaign are a passive faction. That is, they're not going to expand on their own. They're going to basically just defend their homelands. Occasionally you might see them send an army onto your territory to help defend your own territory. I've had this happen in the past, and it's very enjoyable when you do see it happen. But other than that, they're only going to be expanding through maybe bribery of a settlement, and that's going to be extremely rare. So you don't basically have to worry about the Dwarves backstabbing you or anything, and that makes it a very relaxing campaign in that sense, even though you share this close proximity. You have another settlement here, another very wealthy potential in Esgaroth. Given the closeness of these settlements and the trade resources here, including wine, fish, horses, livestock, you are in a really good shape financially, just holding this core of your settlements. Really quickly here, we can tell that you are projected to make 11,000 over your first turn. Now that will fluctuate somewhat. As I've said in my other campaign guides, I like to set my settlements onto low taxes so that my faction leader will have a higher authority as a result, and the family members who are under him will be more loyal. But even with that, you will find yourself pretty consistently making a lot of money as the Kingdom of Dale, and that of course makes many things easier. Heorth, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this, would be the settlement to your northwest. This has the timber resource, and it is, I believe, the only such settlement that you begin with. This makes it valuable in the sense that if you increase the industry buildings here up to the highest tier, you can get carpentry workshops, I believe it's called, which is a building that reduces building costs not only in the settlement itself but across your entire faction, and you'll be doing a lot of building, and that just makes it even easier. We can swing over to the west here, and you can see Framsburg is positioned in this this corner basically of the world. There are some passes through the mountains both to the north here and to the west. But these are occupied by rebels initially, so it's going to be some time before you're threatened here, although it does happen. You will see a Dunabar, which does start with a presence over here on the west, will expand eventually and take these orc holds unless you do it first. So you will want to watch and just make sure that they don't sort of take you by surprise. But otherwise, you're pretty much walled off here. You have your elves, the elves as a neighbor here. Like the dwarves, this is also a passive faction, which means they're not going to be expanding anywhere. And you can get trade rights with them and potentially an alliance fairly early to increase that trade income even further. Your other neighbor in the region is going to be another ally, and this is the Bjorning Chiefdom. This is a faction with whom you do also have trade rights and military access. The difference, of course, is that you do not have as strong an alliance as you do with the dwarves. So in other words, the dwarves will follow you into your wars for the most part, and we would see that after the first turn, if I were to click end turn here, the dwarves would declare war on the Chiefdom of Northrune and the Chiefdom of Rune. So the dwarves will follow you in your alliances. If you're attacked, the dwarves will declare war on the attacker as well. That's not going to be the case necessarily with the Bjornings, and they're not set up to be a passive faction. They are going to be expanding mostly in the neighborhood of the Anduin Vales. And that can be a problem because once they run out of rebel settlements to expand into, they may attack you. It may happen. And so you do want to be prepared for that, especially in these settlements like Framsburg, which are going to be pretty isolated from your other places. You certainly can get people over here through the North Eaves, but it is somewhat of a long walk, so roads might be a good build in those places. Your other three settlements, well, there's really only two, and then this one is a fort. The two settlements here, Yodor and Bern, are both alike in some ways. They are a little bit out of the range of your economic powerhouse near the Long Lake, but they do have some advantages. Yodor in particular has the livestock resource, which means that if you upgrade your tanneries, you can equip your military units with better armor eventually. So that might make this a good candidate for a military policy so that you can make the most use of your high-tier units and give them the best armor. Whereas Bern might be a better option for a financial policy because it does have a couple of resources here, horses and fish, and you could just leverage that. Your Fort of Karnan, this is the one of the permanent forts on the map. It's actually rare for this part of the world to have such a fort, but Dale is blessed with one. You'll notice it occupies this very important strategic position across the River Karnan. And at the very beginning of the campaign, your first job and the crisis you're going to have to handle is this host of the Chiefdom of Northrune. Right next to the Fort of Karnan, you can bet that they are going to besiege it pretty much from turn one. And so the best thing to do is to get as many units as you can together from, I would say, all of these settlements from the city of Dale. You could even basically take everybody out of here and get them pretty close to dealing with the problems at the fort. But I wouldn't necessarily wait for them. I would certainly start assembling an army in Yodor and Bern, and then you can be there before they assault. If you can handle it, this is not the worst army. It's not impossible to fight, but if you can handle that, then you'll be in a very good position because Northrune, one of your two enemies at the beginning of the campaign, is actually fairly weak. Let's remove the fog of war here, and we'll take a look at their setup. So they do have these three settlements initially, Gargal, Garth, and Fornhud, their capital. There are a couple of rebel settlements further to the east, which they may take, but they also border Dorwinion, and Dorwinion tends to be somewhat aggressive against these guys early on. So it may be the case that between your war with them, the dwarves joining you, and the threat of Dorwinion to their south, that the Chiefdom of Northrune may approach you with a ceasefire. This happened to me in my current campaign, actually. They, after I beat them, before I could even besiege Gargal, they approached me with a ceasefire offer. I countered with a demand for, I think, 10,000 Mirian, and they accepted. So we've been trading buddies basically ever since, and I even got an alliance out of them eventually. You can see, as we're going to take a look at a campaign in progress, that we never really had conflicts after that point. So one thing that you'll find is with all the money coming in and the relatively limited number of enemies, you can kind of have your pick of these wars and just continue to make money, continue to build, continue to train a very, very intimidating army indeed, and then use that to threaten your neighbors. You've got basically these three areas that you can invade. If you don't want to betray your allies, the Bjornings, or just cause a needless war with the elves or dwarves, the best approach is probably to head south early on. And you may not need to make the first move. If you're fighting against Northmen, if they don't want to cease fire initially, then you may be campaigning in the east only to find Rovanian or Dorwinian trying to send some troops into your lands early on. I would seize that opportunity and follow it up aggressively. Keep training troops, as many as you can of decent quality early on. Send them to the south, focusing on one at a time of these factions if possible. I would probably prioritize Dorwinian because they have relatively few settlements, but you do need one of them for your victory conditions, Belligant here. So if you, and this is also a very wealthy province, if you can take this early, then you're going to be in even better financial shape, and you get some very nice unique units to train out of here as well. But what happened in my campaign was Dorwinian approached me with a ceasefire before I could even take one of their cities. I got 10,000 Mirian off of them for the privilege, and then made Rovanian my focus. And Rovanian actually became my first protectorate. And this is one of the great pleasures of playing as a rich faction like Dale, where you can really pour your resources against one faction at a time, was that it's actually possible for you to get protectorates, and that really helps to rationalize the borders that you may find yourself having in the late game. So instead of in the early game, you have these very nice defensible river crossings, forests, and mountains. But as you expand inevitably, you're going to be expanding into wider territory with fewer borders. But that's where the protectorates come in. So if you can intimidate, bully a faction, you can often get them to be a protectorate with all of that money. So let's take a look at some of the buildings that you can use before we get into a later stage of the campaign, because Dale has just a ton of options. So what we have here is 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers of military development. That's 1 or 2 more than most factions in the mod. And we'll go over those units later, but it's just worth noting that there is a tremendous amount of variety here. You have several tiers worth of very good archers, some of which are very affordable, some of which are more of a hybrid unit. You have good infantry in your black spears, which have throwing spears, as well as good armor and good melee staying power. You've even got decent cavalry with some light sword cavalry, and then at a higher tier, Riders of Dale, good spear-armed cavalry. And you've got armor piercing with your Hearthmen of Dale. So you've got just a ton of options. And so it's really worth it to look at your homelands and determine where do I want that military focus. I would absolutely build up the city of Dale to get all of these tiers, because it is a chief settlement, so you can build whatever you want here. But I also like to have another 1 or 2 military settlements, probably Yodor over here, and then I would probably make Framsburg another one. Like Yodor in the east, this has a livestock resource, which allows you to outfit these soldiers in better armor. So to me, that always seems like a good place for a military policy. In terms of other buildings, though, Dale has quite the variety. It's got very high-tier farms. You've got a lot of markets, of course. You can build regular roads as well as stone-paved roads, which really helps not only with income, but in transporting your troops around an increasingly growing kingdom. Your cultural conversion, your alignment is going to be Ways of the West, and so these buildings are always going to be worth it. You want to go for the King's Feasts basically everywhere, because it's going to bring you in a lot of money and troop experience. You don't get any roster switch from changing alignment, so it'll be a pretty straightforward policy there. In terms of healing, you, like basically every other faction, gets an herbalist and healer, but you also get a unique tier of Places of Mirth. You get Hall of Drinking and Hall of Feasts like all the other Northmen, but unlike some, you get the Hall of Song, which increases law across your realm. And so this is something to definitely watch for, because a law bonus translates into increased income, as you cut down on the corruption or the mismanagement from your far-flung settlements. So this is actually a good tier to build into. Usually I don't go for the halls of drinking, but with Dale, I found it worth it, especially as you expanded farther from your capital. You get, like many factions, city development. Dale is a major faction, so to speak, so you can build specialization buildings. We'll take a look at what these options are, and there's quite a few. Military assimilation allows you to build your higher quality troops outside of your homelands. So some of those units that we saw, for example, the Hearth troops or the Black Arrows, those elite archers, normally those are things that are only available in your homelands in basically your starting settlements. But if you end up conquering into Rune or over the Misty Mountains into Eriador, you may find yourself missing some of those units, and you could go for a military assimilation building to get them even far away. Continuing with the theme of adaptability, you also have the option of levy outposts. These allow recruitment of more advanced local levies. So this doesn't allow you to train your own troops, but it allows you to sort of lean into the native style of fighting. So this is another option for those outlands. Again, this is going to be, well, actually, this doesn't necessarily require just military. This could be a financial option for you as well. So if you find yourself, expanding into these far-flung places, it might be worth it to sort of see what the levy outposts might provide. In terms of financial style, you do have some variety as well. You've got trading posts, which are available in provinces with major rivers. Now, for the starting position, you definitely have that. You've got the river running, and I don't know if the Kelduin count or the Karnin rather counts, but this is definitely a major river, and so is the Anduin. So you've got a few places where you could build this initially. One of those could be Esgaroth, because this, in my opinion, is a perfect place for a financial policy, and trading posts would absolutely help you leverage that financial power. Let's see. A Dwarven Armory. So this is more of a military option. This is allowing you basically to outfit your troops in quality armor. And this is something I would recommend in one of your homelands, obviously. It needs to be in a homeland or a Dwarven province. So if you end up in possession of a Dwarven settlement, this might be a good option for you. I might go for this in something like Framsburg. Now, this is because Framsburg is, while it is a homeland, it also allows some different recruitment from your native troops, like the troops that are available in Dale itself. So you notice that these are some sort of woodman types. Now, these are interesting options. They're a little different in how they perform from your native troops, and they have some advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that they tend to be lighter on the armor and thus less durable. But you can make up for that with the Dwarven Armory, or of course you can use it anywhere else in your homelands to increase the robustness of your already very strong native Dalish troops. A toy workshop is another financial option. I actually go for this in Dale every single time. I know it's not the best policy there. Dale is a place where I crank out high-quality troops. It would make a ton of sense to put a Dwarven Armory there. But I think back to the lore and the mention of the Bilbo's farewell party of toys from Dale, right? So I just can't not build a toy workshop, and it does have a financial benefit. In addition to the trade, though, this has the ability to increase the happiness in the province. So this might be something you consider if you've got a settlement that's far away and you're having trouble with public order, although probably you're going to build this for the income rather than anything else. An interesting option here is emissary headquarters, and this is one that you might consider in Dale if you find yourself using emissaries a lot. This provides well-trained emissaries for one, so you can have some emissaries that come out with a few levels of experience right out of the gate. That does help with bribery, I think, primarily. The other benefit here is that it helps make provincial pacification cheaper and faster everywhere. And again, provincial pacification is that necessary first step, or actually a couple of steps, before you can make use of your settlement, before you can build any military buildings, before you can really crank out a lot of income of a settlement. You have to pacify it. The more provinces you own, the more time and money that takes. And so this is a way to counter that powerful break on your expansion. So this might be a pretty powerful option initially for you to train in Dale. You could make it very early, or you could build it once you have another settlement. I might do something like that in Rovanost if you end up with it, because this is a chief city, and this needs to be built in a chief city. But Rovanost is not a settlement where you're going to be doing a lot of great recruiting, possibly. It's not a place that you're going to get a ton of financial benefit out of, so that might be a good option for the emissary quarters. Siege Workshop. You always want to make one of these. This allows you to train ballistas. Now, ballistas in and of themselves are useful mostly for avoiding having to wait a turn before you can assault a settlement. You can set them up and you can use them to attack the gates and then just run right in. Otherwise, you can use them in a field army to potentially get some shots in before they approach, but they're not as powerful as, say, catapults, right? So they're not going to be this really game-changing siege weapon. What they are useful for is for a hidden unit that actually meshes fairly well with the next set of buildings I want to look at here. And that is the Inventor's Workshop, or as we call them in the game, the Innovation Buildings. This is an entire separate section of buildings that you can build, like city development, but that's only available to Dale. They get all these toys as Dale. Dale got a lot of stuff in this mod. So these things are some, but not all, of the things that you can build within Inventor's Workshop. You get things that increase farm output, such as the heavy plow. You get things that increase, again, I think farm and trade, such as the windmill. Longboat Workshop is something that I might build, say, in Esgaroth. So again, this is something you can build in a coastal province or a place with large rivers. So the river running would be one of those that works. If you have a coastal province, you can train warboats out of this, or like experienced warboats. But this is primarily something you would build for trade. A firework factory is one that, again, I might build in Dale just because of the sort of the lore callback there. But it does improve not only happiness but income as well. And there is a hidden option that only comes into play if you have already built the Siege Workshop, and that is a crossbow workshop. So if you have the Siege Workshop for ballistas, you can build a crossbow workshop in an Inventor's building or Innovation building, and then recruit crossbowmen. Now, I know there are going to be some lore purists out there who will know that crossbows are never once mentioned in Tolkien's lore. I don't know if he ever said anything about not liking crossbows. I know he was a more of a traditional bow guy. But given that Dale is seen in this mod as a more innovative faction than several others, it's not such a sort of stuck in its ways faction looking back to history like, say, the Reunited Kingdom might be. This is a faction that's really grown in the Fourth Age and is working with the dwarves and is expanding and trying new things. So it certainly seems suitable that if crossbows were to appear anywhere in Middle-earth, it might be among the crafty folk of Dale. But we've sort of buried them behind some hidden buildings so that you're not going to see armies of crossbowmen running around. And in fact, I have never seen the AI faction of Dale, train crossbowmen. So you can rest assured that if you don't want to see them in your campaign, you never have to. But if you do want to see them, first build that Siege Workshop and then go back to the Innovation building and see what surprises await. If I were to do that, I would probably do it in a military settlement, because you need that for the Siege Workshop anyway, but in a place where you can have, let's say, the livestock resource to get those crossbowmen with a little bit of an edge in terms of their armor. So in terms of the buildings, I think that's most of what we have to talk about. What I'd like to do now is load up a campaign in progress as the Kingdom of Dale, and we'll talk a bit about how I progressed and the great advantages of protectorates. Now, I do have a video on protectorates that is on the channel, just going over how to get them, why they're useful, and what you can do with them, because they do have some hidden benefits. And so I'm not going to rehash all of that here, but suffice it to say, protectorates do cost money, and they do require you to militarily dominate the target faction. And those are two things that you can achieve very easily as the Kingdom of Dale. In fact, by, I think, turn 20, I had acquired my first protectorate as Rovanian. And at that point, I had taken Arab Gobel from them, I had taken Yathin Ra from them, and I was besieging their last settlement, Rovanost. And as I was doing that, they had an emissary out. I went to that emissary with one of my own and offered them protectorate status, as well as 100,000 Mirian. At that point, I had over 200,000 in the bank, so it was no great hardship, and they agreed to it. And at that point, ever since then, I've been gifting them territory to sort of expand their area. That does a couple of things. One, it increases the amount of money that they will return to me in tribute, because if they have more provinces, they're making more money, and therefore they're sending more my way. But it also helps me to create a buffer zone of basically places where I don't have to worry about being attacked. And so as a result, I have had an incredibly enjoyable, nice, relaxing, peaceful campaign as the Kingdom of Dale, where I have been able to basically lock down this part of the map because I've been gifting Rovanians like, say, Breg Estelad, and I'm not even at war with Rune anymore because I did fight them quite a bit, but I fought them enough. I took Breg Estelad from that, gifted it to Rovanian, and since then, I've had no trouble. As soon as we didn't share a border, I was able to get a peace settlement with Rune. They paid me a bunch of money for it, and since then I've just been hanging out and expanding in other ways. I've been expanding and increasing the holdings of Rovanian. One thing to note is, as you're very likely to expand into the south, you do want to be careful of these factions, the Reunited Kingdom and the Kingdom of Adunabar. You can see that they're having a bit of trouble right now. Adunabar is training tons of stacks. So is the Reunited Kingdom. They're fighting just these massive wars over the mountains of Mordor here. And Harad is also grown quite a bit. As you can tell, they've expanded all the way up to Emin Arden, and they don't show any signs of losing that. And the problem for you is you're very likely to bump into those factions if you expand into the south. And if you were to simply eliminate Rovanian and take all of their land for yourself, you're next on the chopping block. Probably what would happen very soon is one of these factions would declare war on you, and then you'd be fighting an endless war against these very wealthy, rich southern factions. Now, that can be a lot of fun, but for me, I like the campaign gameplay a bit more than I like fighting battle after battle after battle. I like my battles to be few and decisive, and so you can really manage that with the Kingdom of Dale by getting these protectorates, gifting them territory, and then sort of sealing off lands for yourself. Now, it hasn't all been fun and games in my Dale campaign, because I did have an interesting development when the Bjornings actually attacked my protectorate, Rovanian. They attacked them, and they took mid-deeping for themselves. And at that point, the alliance was over, because I always protect my protectorates. And so I swept down from the north, took Oldford, took Holt, took Thrimfeld, and before I even got to some of their other settlements, I was able to approach the Bjornings and offer them 200,000 Mirian for protectorate status, and wouldn't you know it, they agreed. And here's the thing about this. So I'm talking about throwing gobs and gobs of money at these factions for protectorate status, but you get it all back the next turn. They're giving you tribute. They're giving you excess tribute out of their coffers. And what you give to them becomes that excess tribute that they can in turn give back to you. So if you just wait a turn, yeah, you've spent 200,000 or whatever it is in gold to get the protectorate status from them, but they're going to send that back to you next turn with interest, and they're going to keep sending you tribute thereafter. If you can take a look at the financial report from the last turn of this campaign, I'm making over 5,000 a turn on tributes. Now that number does go up and down as my protectorates make money and lose money. They're spending some money on building, they're spending some money on training, and as a result, the amount they have extra lying around goes up and down. But really, it's so worth it for me to be able to determine exactly where and when I'm going to fight. And as you can see, I'm making so much money that I've got full stacks just sort of sitting around, kind of waiting for something to happen. If I, for example, might need to go to war with one of these factions because I had to choose between two, I can easily turn my armies to the south and deal with that problem. One of the things that I've found pretty fun is that I've been able to expand my influence west. And so since the eastern half and southern borders are totally fine, I've been able to pour a lot of resources into this war with Adunabar. And so I've taken the Orc holds up here in the north, I've taken Lastbridge and Ettendale, and I've got a force headed for Carn Doom right now with a few crossbowmen, as well as some of the other basic Dale troops to take out Carn Doom and then probably sweep further west. I'm looking at 27 provinces right now. I need 40 to win. One of those does need to be Belligant. So at some point, I'm either going to need to go to war with Dorwinion, which I don't particularly want to do if they're not causing trouble for me, or I could see about buying some of these provinces from them. Now, you can't buy their capital, so it may come to blows, but we'll see. In any case, this has been an extremely enjoyable campaign, and I'd highly recommend it. Dale is, in a lot of ways, I think, the best intro faction to the mod. There are a lot of mechanics and different building trees and things to sort of understand about the 4th Age, and if you're new to the mod, I highly recommend starting a campaign as Dale. You're surrounded by a lot of allies, you're making a lot of money, and so your choices in the early game, although they're still important, you can bounce back from a mistake here or there pretty easily. And although it can be a very easy campaign, it's still a very enjoyable one in a lot of ways. So in the next video, we are going to look at the battle prospects for the Kingdom of Dale and see what that might entail in terms of battle deployment and unit selection and things like that. I hope you'll join me for that video, and until then, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.